Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The stars shone down on the alien planet of Tyrex, its violet-tinted sky painting a serene picture of another world. The humanoid members of the Tarini tribe stood in clusters, exchanging murmurs in their native tongue as the sound of a distant spacecraft reached their ears. Today a guest was arriving, an envoy from Earth, sent to negotiate a peace treaty with the Tarini. Zan, the tribe's elder and leader, stood with his arms crossed, his sharp yet wise gaze fixed on the horizon. His mind was racing with thoughts of the upcoming meeting. The human, a tall man named Marcus Kane, was part of a delegation sent by the United Federation of Earth. Zan had met humans before but never one in such a capacity. He had heard tales of their resilience, their strength, their remarkable adaptability. Yet today it was not the Federation that had sent him here, it was the custom of the Tarini. "Will he understand?" asked Talina, the chief of the tribe's warriors, a fierce woman with eyes that glinted like the metal of her sword. "The humans are known for their many customs, but this?" She trailed off, glancing sideways toward the ceremonial ground. Zan turned toward her, his face unreadable. "You will have to understand. The survival of our people depends on this treaty. If he fails, there will be consequences." Talina frowned. She had heard rumors of the Tarini's custom. This particular tradition, passed down through generations, involved a unique ritual that no outsider had ever dared to participate in. It was said to be vital to their culture, and the fate of any alien visitor was sealed depending on whether they could succeed. In the distance, the ship's silhouette appeared, sleek and silver against the dimming horizon. The sound of the engines grew louder as it descended onto the landing platform. The guests were arriving. Marcus Kane stepped off the ramp of the ship, his face lined with both determination and curiosity. The humans had long tried to establish relations with various alien species across the galaxy, but none had been quite as peculiar as the Tarini. He had studied the customs, the languages, and the history. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to face. Zan, with his massive frame and weathered features, stepped forward to greet him, his posture rigid and formal. "Welcome, human," Zan said in the common tongue, his voice deep and commanding. "We are pleased to meet you on this sacred land. Our customs are ancient, but they are the foundation of our people. We trust that you will respect them." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I understand, Elder. I'm here to ensure peace. Whatever it takes." Zan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You will see soon enough that it takes more than words." The tribe's women, dressed in intricate ceremonial robes adorned with vibrant gemstones, stood to the side, their gazes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that seemed to pierce through him. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible tension in the air, one that Marcus couldn't quite place but knew was vital to their culture. As he followed Zan into the heart of the village, a slow realization began to dawn on Marcus. There were no men among the women. The tribe's entire social structure seemed to be ruled by the female warriors, the matriarchs who held the most power in this strange society. "Is there something I should know about the ceremony, Elder?" Marcus asked, his voice hesitant. Zan turned to him, the faintest trace of a smile curling at the edge of his lips. "In our culture, there is a tradition that is crucial for the unity of the tribe. We call it the Trial of the Unifier. For a foreign guest to establish peace with the Tarini, he must first earn the trust and respect of the women." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Earn the trust of the women?" "Indeed," Zan replied. "In our society, the women hold great influence, not only in matters of war but also in matters of life. They shape the destiny of our people. To gain their approval is to gain the heart of the tribe." Marcus blinked in surprise. "How exactly do I earn their approval?" Zan gave him a knowing look. "The trial is not something you can prepare for. It requires you to connect with the women, to show them that you are worthy of their admiration and respect. There is no escaping it. Only through this trial can peace be achieved." A cold sweat began to form on Marcus's brow. This was unlike anything he had expected. He had prepared for diplomatic discussions, for formal treaties and agreements, but this was something far more personal, far more intricate. His heart raced, but he steeled himself, reminding himself that failure was not an option. The fate of his people rested in this moment. As the women of the tribe gathered around, the tension in the air grew palpable. They were waiting, watching. The air around Marcus was thick with anticipation as the women of the Tarini tribe gathered in a circle, their eyes fixed on him. The violet hues of the setting sun bathed the scene in a soft, ethereal glow, adding to the surreal nature of the moment. Marcus stood at the center of the circle, flanked by Elder Zan and Talina, who had joined the group as the chief of the tribe's warriors. Both women had been present during the earlier negotiations, but now they stood at the periphery watching closely. The women who stood before Marcus were not like the women he had known back on Earth. These were not docile, passive beings. They carried an air of authority, of power, their faces chiseled with the marks of leadership and experience. They were warriors, strategists, and diplomats in their own right. Their very presence sent a ripple of unease through him, but he kept his composure. Zan's voice broke the silence. The trial of the unifier is simple in its essence, but complex in its execution. To unite with the Tyrini, you must prove yourself worthy. You will perform an act of respect and strength, one that shows you understand the heart of our people. Marcus swallowed, his throat dry. What exactly do I need to do? Zan's eyes gleamed with the hint of a challenge. You must delight the women of our tribe. Win their favor. Show that you are not just a man, but one capable of understanding the intricacies of the Tyrini heart. Marcus frowned, uncertainty creeping in. Delight them, he echoed. Talina stepped forward, her stance commanding. Yes, delight them. The act is not as crude as it might seem, but it is necessary. You must prove that you are not here merely to make treaties and sign documents. You must connect with our essence. Only then will the bond be formed. The weight of her words hung in the air like a stone poised to fall, and Marcus's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but this trial was not part of his diplomatic training. The women surrounding him, silent yet attentive, exuded an aura of expectation that made his every movement feel scrutinized. He glanced at Zan, his mind racing for some kind of explanation, some clarity. And what if I fail? What if I can't connect with them in the way you require? Zan's expression softened slightly, though his tone remained firm. Failure is not an option, human. If you cannot win their favor, the peace treaty will be void, and the consequences for both your people and ours will be severe. The women decide our fates. Marcus had heard the severity in Zan's voice, but now he felt the weight of it fully. This wasn't just a test of diplomacy or negotiation. It was a test of his ability to bond on a deeply personal, emotional level with a society that was so different from his own. The women began to move closer, their eyes locking with his, each gaze more intense than the last. They circled him like silent sentinels, and Marcus couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. It wasn't that they seemed threatening, it was something more fundamental. They were assessing him, peeling back his layers, probing his very essence. He thought back to the customs of Earth, to the countless cultural practices and rituals he had studied throughout his years of service. Nothing had prepared him for this. He had negotiated with diplomats, conferred with leaders, faced down entire fleets, but this was something entirely different. It was personal. It was raw. One of the women, a striking figure with long silver hair and dark almond-shaped eyes, stepped forward. Her presence radiated authority, and Marcus could tell she was one of the highest-ranking members of the tribe. I am Lyra, she spoke, her voice soft yet commanding. You stand here not as a guest, but as a potential member of our world. To gain our favor, you must show us who you truly are. Marcus hesitated for a moment before nodding. I understand. Lyra studied him with a curious gaze before gesturing for him to follow. Without a word, she led him to a small raised platform where a group of children were sitting, playing with alien toys. The women followed, standing in a semicircle around the platform. Lyra gestured for Marcus to join her in the center. The first task is one of empathy, she said, her tone unwavering. You must connect with our young. Show them that you understand the importance of nurturing and leadership. These children are the future of our tribe, and if you cannot connect with them, you will fail to understand us. Marcus stood still for a moment, unsure of how to approach this. He was a soldier, a diplomat, not a caretaker. But something in Lyra's eyes told him that this was not the time for hesitation. He took a deep breath and moved closer to the children, his heart pounding in his chest. The children, no older than 10 or 11 by human standards, looked up at him with wide eyes. They weren't frightened, they were simply curious. Marcus knelt down, placing himself at their level, and offered them a warm smile. He knew that the smallest gesture could go a long way in establishing trust. He reached out, gently picking up one of the toys, a small mechanical creature that moved on its own. The children's eyes brightened as he began to manipulate the toy, making it dance and spin in the air. They giggled and clapped, their joy infectious. Lyra watched him closely, her gaze calculating. You've made them laugh, she observed. But it is not enough to make them laugh, human. It is about more than amusement. It is about understanding the significance of play, of guiding the next generation. Marcus paused, his fingers stilling on the toy. The laughter of the children echoed in his ears, but something deeper began to stir within him. He wasn't just entertaining them, he was engaging with them, listening to their silent cues, interpreting their needs through their laughter and expressions. A small girl, no older than 6, approached him hesitantly. She held a delicate handmade flower in her hand and offered it to him. Her eyes, wide and innocent, stared up at him, waiting. Marcus took the flower, his heart suddenly full. He looked down at the child and then at the others, who watched him expectantly. "Thank you," he said softly. "This means more than you know." Lyra nodded, a slight smile curving her lips. "You may have gained their respect. But this is just the first step." As Marcus stood and turned to face the tribe, he realized that this trial was more than a test of his actions. It was a test of his soul. He would need to learn how to feel, how to connect, in a way that he had never been trained to do. The air in the ceremonial circle felt thick as Marcus stood before the women of the Turini tribe, the weight of their unblinking gazes almost tangible. He had passed the first trial, earning the favor of the children, but the feeling of being scrutinized, of being judged, not only by the tribe's leaders but by the very fabric of their culture, was ever present. This was no mere display of diplomacy. This was something much more primal, more elemental. Lyra, still standing in the center of the circle, motioned for him to step forward. "The next step is one of connection. You must show your strength, not through words but through action." "A dance?" Marcus blinked, certain that he had misheard. "A dance?" The women around him remained silent, each watching him intently, waiting for him to respond. His mind raced, searching for some explanation, some method to this madness. He was no dancer. He was a soldier trained in combat and diplomacy, not the art of fluid, graceful movement. But this trial wasn't about what he had been trained for, it was about understanding, about bending himself to the will of the tribe, embracing their customs. Lyra's expression softened, as if sensing his discomfort. "It is not the dance you fear but what it represents. Through the movements, you will show us your understanding of balance, of strength and grace, of the interconnectedness of all things. A true unifier does not seek to dominate or control, but to flow with the rhythm of the tribe, to adapt." Marcus exhaled slowly, his pulse quickening. His mind scrambled to adjust to the shifting parameters of the trial. He wasn't sure he could perform this dance, but he could no longer hesitate. He had committed himself to this path, and the only way to succeed now was to dive into it fully, to give himself over to the challenge. He stood tall and squared his shoulders. "I will do this." Lyra gave a nod of approval, her gaze unyielding. "Good. Follow my lead." The women parted to form an open space in the center of the circle. The air was thick with expectation. Marcus felt the pulse of the tribe's heartbeat, one of urgency, of centuries-old traditions, beating down on him with every passing second. Lyra lifted her arms, her movements fluid, each gesture precise yet graceful. She began to sway, the rhythm of her steps almost hypnotic, as though she was not merely moving her body, but the very energy of the world around her. Her form was strong, yet there was an elegance to it, like a storm that could destroy everything in its path, but instead chose to dance with the wind. Marcus watched her closely, trying to mirror her movements, but his body was stiff, his steps awkward. He stumbled as he attempted to mimic the fluidity of her form, unsure of the rhythm, his limbs betraying him at every turn. He felt the women's eyes on him, scrutinizing every misstep, and a deep sense of humiliation rose within him. Lyra, noticing his discomfort, stopped abruptly, her sharp eyes locking with his. "You are too rigid," she said, her voice calm but stern. "You are trying to control the dance. You must surrender to it. Let the rhythm take you." Marcus's face flushed with embarrassment, but he refused to let it show. He had come this far and he wasn't about to back down. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a brief moment, and let the music of the world around him seep into his bones. The wind rustled the tall grasses, and the faint hum of the distant stars seemed to add to the growing pulse of the tribe's collective energy. He was no longer fighting the dance, he was going to become part of it. Slowly he began to move, his feet shifting in time with the rhythm. His body started to flow, the stiffness slowly melting away as he let go of his need for control. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't graceful at first, but it was his. His steps began to match the beat of Lyra's movements, the ebb and flow of his actions syncing with the pulse of the tribe's collective heart. His arms lifted, then dropped, mirroring the fluid, expansive motions of the women around him. With each step, he could feel the bond between him and the tribe deepening, the distance between him and the women shrinking. The dance was no longer a test. It was a conversation. And as his movements became more natural, more attuned to the energy around him, he felt something shift within him. It was as though the space between him and the Tarini women had closed, and in that moment, they were not separate. They were connected, moving as one. Lyra's eyes softened as she observed him. She slowed her movements to match his pace, her expression shifting from one of skepticism to approval. The others followed suit, their bodies now flowing in time with Marcus's movements, their previously rigid expressions melting into smiles and nods of appreciation. The dance had become a language, one that transcended words. When the dance finally ended, Marcus stood in the center of the circle, panting lightly, his heart racing, not from exhaustion but from the sheer intensity of the experience. His limbs tingled, alive with the energy of the tribe, and for the first time since arriving on Tyrex, he felt truly connected to the land, to the people, and to the women of the tribe. The barriers had fallen, if only for a moment. He was no longer the outsider, the alien envoy. He was part of something much greater. Lyra stepped forward, a look of respect in her eyes. "You have proven yourself," she said quietly. "Not just through your dance but through your willingness to adapt. To let go. You have passed the second trial." Marcus breathed a sigh of relief, his body still humming with the aftereffects of the dance. He had feared failure more than anything, but now, with each trial completed, he was beginning to understand. The Tarini's customs were not about performance for performance's sake. They were about connection, about the ability to transform, to grow, to become part of something larger than oneself. But even as the weight of his success settled over him, Marcus knew that the final trial would be the true test. The women had begun to trust him, but it was only one step toward the deeper unity that he needed to achieve. To earn the peace treaty, to secure the future of both his people and the Tarini, he would have to prove something far greater than strength, grace, or understanding. He would have to prove his worthiness to lead, not just in battle, not just in treaties, but in spirit. The final trial awaited, and Marcus was more determined than ever to meet it head-on. The firelight flickered as it danced against the twilight sky, casting long shadows on the smooth stone floor of the ceremonial circle. The women of the Tarini tribe had gathered once more, their presence imposing yet calm. The atmosphere was laden with quiet anticipation. This was the moment Marcus had been both dreading and preparing for, the final trial. He could feel the weight of the tribe's history, their customs, and their unspoken expectations pressing against him like a tangible force. Lyra, her face a picture of both calm and intensity, stepped forward. Her silver hair caught the light of the fire, her eyes glowing with an ancient wisdom. She was the matriarch of the tribe's ruling council, and her approval meant everything. Her voice, when she spoke, held the weight of centuries. The final trial, human, is one that will require more than mere action or understanding. This is a test of the heart. The women of this tribe do not accept those who are not capable of feeling deeply. We are not ruled by logic alone. Our hearts guide us, and they must be in harmony with the decisions we make. To earn the bond of peace, you must prove your heart, your spirit, to us. Marcus stood tall, but his body tensed, uncertainty creeping in. He had expected a challenge of strength or intellect, not something so intangible, so raw. His thoughts turned inward, seeking answers in his own heart. He had always been a man of reason, a soldier first and foremost. His heart, he realized, was not something he had ever truly examined. Was it enough? Could he unlock the depth of emotion necessary to pass this trial? Lyra's gaze pierced him as though reading his thoughts. The trial begins now. You will choose one woman from this circle, and you will share with her your heart. Speak of your people. Speak of what you seek from us. Speak of your true desires. Marcus's breath caught in his chest. One woman. It was clear this wasn't merely a test of words, it was a test of trust. He would have to lay bare the core of his being to one of the Tarini women, showing her not the diplomat, not the soldier, but the man beneath. The thought terrified him. The women around him remained still, but their eyes followed his every movement. Lyra's face was unreadable, but the other women, the warriors and leaders, watched with a sharp intensity, as though this moment would determine the future of both their people and his. The air hummed with energy as if the very fabric of the universe was holding its breath. His mind raced. Who could he choose? His first instinct was to pick Lyra, the leader, the matriarch, the one who could seal his fate with a single nod. But then something stopped him. This wasn't about gaining the favor of a powerful leader. This was about opening himself up to someone who could see past his title, past his mission. It had to be someone who could understand him not as a diplomat but as a man. And then he saw her, Talina. The chief of the warriors, fierce and unyielding. Though she had not been the first to approach him, her strength had always been undeniable. There was something in the way she carried herself, something in the depths of her dark eyes that intrigued him. Her presence was commanding, but there was also a quiet vulnerability behind her gaze. She was not like the others. She didn't wear her authority like armor, it was an extension of her, something innate. He knew then that she was the one. "Talina," Marcus said, his voice steady, but his heart thundering in his chest. "I choose you." A ripple of murmurs passed through the women, but Talina didn't flinch. She simply regarded him with a steady gaze, one eyebrow raised. Without a word, she stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate, as though preparing for something of great significance. The circle around them parted, giving them space. Marcus took a deep breath, his mind racing for the right words. But there were no rehearsed speeches in this moment, no scripts to follow. He had to speak from his heart. He met Talina's eyes and for the first time truly saw her. He saw not just the warrior but the woman, the leader, the human. And in that moment he knew he was about to share something he had never shared before, not even with his own people. "My name is Marcus Kane," he began, his voice steady but softer than usual. "I come from Earth, a planet that is still learning how to become something greater than it is. I was chosen to be a part of the delegation because I represent the future of my people. But I've spent so much of my life fighting, leading, negotiating, that I've never truly understood what it means to connect with others. To open up, to share." He paused, gathering his thoughts, feeling the weight of his words. "I've spent years on missions, on the front lines, making choices that affect the lives of millions. But no matter how many treaties I sign, how many battles I win, something always feels missing. I realize now that it's because I've never allowed myself to feel the way I should. I've always been too focused on the end goal, too focused on results." He glanced at Talina, her expression unreadable, but he could feel her presence, steady and grounded, as though she was absorbing every word. "I came here to bring peace to my people. But now I see that peace isn't just about signing papers or shaking hands. It's about trust. It's about letting go of control and allowing others into your heart. I came here thinking I had all the answers. But I don't. I don't know if I'm worthy of your people's trust. I don't know if I can be the leader that you need. But I want to try. I want to understand. I want to learn." Talina's eyes softened, but there was no sign of judgment. She simply waited, her arms crossed, her posture commanding but patient. "I'm scared, Talina," Marcus continued, his voice quieter now. "I'm scared of failing. Scared of making promises I can't keep. Scared of being seen as weak. But most of all, I'm scared of not living up to the trust you're placing in me." The silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning. Talina said nothing at first and Marcus wondered if he had said too much, or too little. But then, slowly, Talina stepped closer, her hand reaching out to place a firm, reassuring grip on his shoulder. "You are not alone, Marcus Kane," she said, her voice a calm counterpoint to his turmoil. "We are all afraid of failure. But it is only in facing that fear that we can grow. You have shown us more than strength, you have shown us vulnerability. And that is the greatest gift you can give." Her words hit him like a wave crashing against a cliff, and for the first time since he had arrived on Tyrex, Marcus felt his defenses fall completely. This wasn't just a trial of strength or even of action. It was a trial of the soul. "I trust you," Talina said, her voice soft yet unwavering. "You are worthy." A weight he hadn't realized he was carrying lifted from his chest. For the first time in this journey, Marcus truly felt seen, not as a human diplomat, not as a soldier, but as a man. And in that moment he understood. This trial had not been about him proving his strength or intellect. It had been about him proving his humanity. Marcus stood in the center of the circle, surrounded by the women of the Turini tribe, his heart still racing from the intensity of the trial. Talina's words echoed in his mind, "You are worthy." He felt a shift within himself, something that had been broken or forgotten now mending slowly, like a wound finally healing. For the first time he truly understood what it meant to connect, to give not just words or actions, but pieces of oneself that had once been buried under layers of duty, fear, and expectation. The firelight flickered in the cool night air, casting long shadows across the stone floor. The women were no longer just a council of leaders and warriors, they were a community, a force bound by their own customs and shared history, and now by something deeper, trust. Lyra, still standing at the edge of the circle, nodded slowly, her gaze piercing but approving. "The final trial is complete, Marcus Kane. You have shown us your heart, your strength, and your ability to connect with the soul of the Turini. This trial was not just about winning our favor, it was about proving that you can understand and respect our ways, not as an outsider but as a potential member of our world. Marcus, still processing the enormity of the moment, met her gaze and nodded. His mouth felt dry but he swallowed, trying to steady his nerves. Thank you. I never fully understood what true connection meant until now. Lyra's sharp gaze softened just slightly, and she took a step forward. Now, the time has come for us to decide whether you are worthy of the peace you seek. You will stand not alone but with us. Your people's future will be tied to our own. Do you understand the weight of that? Marcus exhaled slowly. The weight of the decision was enormous. He was no longer just representing Earth or even his government, he was representing something more fragile, more intimate, his very soul. This wasn't a deal to be brokered with treaties or alliances. This was a pledge, a bond that would forever tie his fate to the Tirini people. I do, he said, his voice steady. And I accept it. Lyra nodded, and the air seemed to shift, a subtle change as if the whole tribe, the whole planet, held its breath. She looked to Talina, who was still standing beside Marcus, her expression unreadable but thoughtful. Talina's eyes met Marcus's, and for a moment, there was no need for words. They understood each other now in ways that transcended diplomacy. In this moment they were equals. Then we will seal this bond, Lyra said, her voice rich with finality. But not with blood or formalities. No. Our people believe in the power of actions. And in the coming days, you will have the opportunity to prove yourself once more. Not to us but to the land itself. Marcus furrowed his brow, unsure of what she meant. The land? Talina stepped forward then, her eyes never leaving his. Yes, she said softly. The Tirini do not live by the same rules as your people. Our strength is not just in our warriors or our minds or our words. It is in the land, the very essence of Tyrex. If you wish to unite us, if you wish to prove that your heart is in harmony with ours, you must prove yourself to the planet. Marcus swallowed, uncertainty creeping back in. How? Lyra smiled, but it was a smile of no humor. In the ancient times, before our ancestors formed this tribe, we used to call upon the trial of the earth. It is a test of endurance, of understanding the pulse of the world around you. You will spend 3 days alone in the wilds of Tyrex, far from any shelter or aid. You must learn to listen, to the earth, to the wind, to the water. Only then will the land reveal its truth to you. Only then can you prove that you are truly one with the Tirini. The words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. 3 days. Alone. In the wilderness. Marcus had faced battles, hostile environments, and complex negotiations, but this was different. He wasn't fighting an enemy. He wasn't negotiating with a foreign power. He was confronting the very essence of the world itself. The thought was daunting, but as he looked around the circle at the fierce women who had become his teachers, his equals, he knew there was no turning back. This was part of the journey, part of the bond he sought to form. If he was going to unite the Tirini with Earth, he would have to earn their trust, not through words but through actions. I accept, he said again, his voice steady, though his stomach churned with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Lyra inclined her head. You have your trial. It begins at dawn. The night passed slowly, the fire burning low as Marcus tried to gather his thoughts. He sat in solitude near the edges of the encampment, his mind racing with what lay ahead. Talina's earlier words about fear and vulnerability echoed in his thoughts, and, for the first time in his life, he found himself truly questioning what it meant to be a leader. Leadership, he realized, was not about power or control, it was about the ability to surrender, to let go of your own ego and accept that there were forces greater than you, forces that required both trust and respect. He lay down beneath the stars, the sound of the wind rustling through the alien trees filling his ears. The warmth of the fire still lingered, but there was a chill in the air that seemed to whisper the ancient wisdom of Tyrex. It was as though the planet itself was alive, watching, waiting. As sleep finally overtook him, Marcus found himself in a strange dream, a vision of the land of Tyrex, vast and untamed. He saw the mountains, the forests, the rivers winding like veins through the earth. In the distance he could see figures moving, Tirini warriors maybe, or perhaps something more primal, something older. In the dream he stood at the edge of a great cliff, overlooking the land. The wind howled around him and he felt a pull, a connection, as though the earth itself was calling him. There was no fear, only a sense of profound understanding. This was where his journey would culminate. This was where he would prove himself, not just to the Tirini but to the planet itself. When he awoke, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon, and he knew that the time had come. The trial of the earth awaited him. And as he stood, preparing to face it, he couldn't help but feel that this was the true test. the one that would define him not just as a diplomat or a soldier, but as a man who could truly understand the world around him. With one last glance at the tribe who were beginning to stir from their slumber, Marcus set off into the wilderness of Tyrex, alone, but not entirely alone. For in the pulse of the land, he felt a connection, a whisper that promised he would not walk this path by himself. The trial had begun. Marcus walked into the wilderness of Tyrex, his every step a silent acknowledgement of the challenge ahead. The land stretched out before him, a vast expanse of alien terrain, where the wind whispered secrets and the trees swayed like silent sentinels. The sky was a deep violet, flecked with stars, and the air carried a strange, almost electric charge. The firelight had long since faded behind him, leaving only the cold clarity of the early morning air. His mission was clear: survive, listen, learn. He had 3 days to immerse himself in the land, to connect with the pulse of Tyrex itself, and to prove his place among the Tyrini. The tribe had made it clear that the trial of the earth wasn't about brute force. It was about understanding the land, respecting its ancient rhythms, and attuning himself to its living, breathing essence. But Marcus couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this trial was something far more profound than just a physical challenge. The Tyrini didn't just live on Tyrex. They were of it, as much a part of the land as the trees and the winds. If he was to win their trust, he had to prove that he, too, could understand the planet, not just as a foreigner but as a true member of their world. The landscape around him was both beautiful and intimidating. Jagged cliffs towered in the distance, casting long shadows across rolling hills that were dotted with strange bioluminescent plants. The air smelled faintly of something sweet and earthy, like the forest after a heavy rain. Marcus paused to take it all in, his eyes scanning the horizon, looking for any sign of danger or opportunity. But there was nothing. He had been prepared for this, mentally at least. As a soldier, he had faced some of the harshest environments humanity could offer. But this was different. Tyrex was alive in ways he had never encountered before. The land itself felt like a living organism, its pulse inescapable, its rhythm constant. As the sun began to rise, casting a soft orange glow over the land, Marcus found a small stream running through a patch of tall grass. Kneeling beside it, he cupped his hands and drank the cool water. It tasted sweet, unlike any water he had ever had before, as if the earth itself had imbued it with something more. Closing his eyes, he focused, trying to listen. The sounds of the wilderness around him were constant. The rustling of leaves, the distant call of strange animals, the rhythmic gurgling of the stream. But beyond the noise, there was a deeper current, a hum in the air that he couldn't quite place. It was subtle, but it was there. He sat for a moment longer, trying to attune himself to the land's rhythm, but the more he tried, the more elusive it seemed. It was as though the land was waiting for him to stop trying to control it, to let go and simply be. His mind wandered back to Talina's words: "You must surrender. Let go of control and allow the world around you to guide you." He had been struggling with that notion since the first trial, the need to control, to bend things to his will. It had served him well in the past, but here on Tyrex, it seemed out of place. The planet didn't care about his will. It cared only for the balance of things, the flow of life that had existed long before humanity arrived. Marcus took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, closing his eyes once more. This time he didn't try to force anything. He just listened, really listened. And slowly, like a wave crashing over him, he began to feel it, the hum, the rhythm, the pulse of Tyrex. It was faint at first, a barely perceptible vibration beneath his skin, but as he focused, it grew stronger. It was in the air, in the water, in the very ground beneath his feet. The planet was alive and it was speaking to him. Suddenly, it wasn't just the landscape that was alive. He was alive with it, connected, in tune with the land as though he had always belonged here. His senses sharpened, his awareness expanded. He could hear the faintest rustling of insects in the grass, the subtle shift of the wind through the trees. He could feel the temperature of the air on his skin, the moisture in the water, the texture of the dirt beneath his hands. For the first time since arriving on Tyrex, Marcus felt something deep within himself click into place. He was no longer an outsider. He was part of this world, this living, breathing planet. And it was alive with him. But the trial wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The land was speaking to him, yes, but it would not reveal its secrets easily. He had to prove that he could endure, really endure. Rising to his feet, Marcus surveyed the terrain ahead. There was no clear path, no obvious direction to follow. The wilderness stretched out endlessly in all directions, a tangle of alien plants and rocks. Yet something about the way the land felt beneath his feet told him which way to go. It wasn't a voice exactly. It was more like an instinct, a deep, unspoken understanding of the earth beneath him, telling him to follow the stream. Without overthinking it, he started walking, following the winding path of the water. As he moved, the sense of connection grew stronger, more urgent. It was as though the land was guiding him, pulling him forward, urging him to keep going. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its violet hue shifting to a deeper, more intense shade. Marcus had stopped several times to rest, but each time he did, he found himself drawn forward again, like a magnet pulling him toward something unknown. The wilderness around him began to change. The stream became wider, flowing faster, its waters rushing over rocks and through dense foliage. The air grew thicker, laden with the scent of damp earth and the promise of rain. There were no animals here, only the rustling of the trees and the soft lapping of the water. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus reached a clearing. In the center stood a massive ancient tree, its trunk wide and gnarled, its roots snaking deep into the earth. The tree towered above him, its branches stretching toward the sky, its leaves shimmering in the light of the sun. This was it, the heart of the land. He stepped forward slowly, reverently, feeling the earth beneath his feet as if it were made of something sacred. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear or exertion, but from a deep sense of awe. As he placed his hand on the rough bark of the tree, something profound happened. The hum of the land grew louder, its rhythm synchronized with his own heartbeat. It was as though the tree, the earth, and he were one. The ancient wisdom of the planet flooded his mind in an overwhelming wave. This is what it means to belong, the land whispered. This is what it means to be in balance. Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He understood now. This trial was not about conquering the land. It was about surrendering to it, becoming one with it. The Tarini didn't just live in harmony with Tyrex, they were part of it. And now so was he. He knew then that the trial was complete. He had passed. The land had accepted him, and in turn he had accepted it. It wasn't about surviving, it was about understanding, about becoming one with the world around him. Marcus stood beneath the ancient tree, his hand still resting on its bark, and for the first time since arriving on Tyrex, he felt at peace. The journey was far from over, but this step had brought him closer to the people of the land, and to his own understanding of what it truly meant to be human. The bond had been forged. And with it, the future of Earth and the Tarini. Marcus stood beneath the ancient tree, the pulse of Tyrex still resonating through him, its rhythm echoing in his heart. The connection he felt to the land was now a part of him, as real and undeniable as his own breath. The trial had revealed something deeper than the surface. It had awakened a truth within him, something profound that transcended diplomacy, survival, or even allegiance. He was no longer just a representative of Earth. He was a part of this land, a part of this world. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. Time seemed to stretch in this sacred place, as if the very earth had slowed to allow Marcus a moment to reflect. He had passed the trial of the earth, but now the question was not what he had accomplished but what it meant. Could this bond with Tyrex truly bridge the gap between his people and the Tarini? Could the unity he had experienced here, in this moment of harmony, become a reality for both worlds? As Marcus stood, lost in thought, the wind began to stir around him. The trees whispered, their leaves rustling as if calling to him. He turned slowly, feeling the pull once more, and there, emerging from the shadows of the forest, stood Talina. She was alone, her figure framed by the fading light, her presence both familiar and distant. She was no longer the woman who had tested him, the leader who had set him on his path. She was something more now, a guide, a witness, perhaps even a fellow traveler on a journey that neither of them could fully understand. "You've done it," Talina said softly, her voice carrying the weight of both pride and something else. Something unspoken, as if she too had experienced the shift in the air. "You've become one with Tyrex." Marcus nodded, his eyes meeting hers. It's hard to describe. It's like I'm alive in a way I wasn't before. Like I've always been part of this world, but I never knew it until now." She stepped closer, the warmth of her presence filling the space between them. "That is the heart of the Tarini. We don't just live on Tyrex, we are of it. It's not something you can teach with words or formalities. It must be felt, experienced. And now you felt it. You've experienced it." Marcus could sense the gravity in her words. Talina was not just speaking of the trial or of their personal bond. She was speaking of something much larger, the shared fate of two worlds, the weight of the future that hung between them. "What does this mean?" Marcus asked, his voice low but filled with hope. "What happens now?" Talina's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Now we wait. The council will decide whether to accept the bond you forged with Tyrex. This is not just a trial of strength or courage. It is a trial of truth. And the truth is not always easy to see, even when it is clear. Marcus felt a pang of worry in his chest. The council, his fate, and the future of Earth's relationship with the Tyrini rested in their hands. He had proven himself in the eyes of the land, but would they see it the same way? Would the women of the council accept him not just as an ally, but as someone who could help lead their people into the future? I've done everything you asked, he said, his voice steady but tinged with doubt. I've proven myself. I've listened to the land, to its rhythm. I've become part of Tyrex. But I'm still human. I'm still from Earth. Will that be enough? Talina was silent for a moment as though weighing his words. Then she stepped closer, her expression softening. What you've done is only the first step. The second will come when you return to the tribe. The bond you've formed with Tyrex is powerful, but it is only a piece of the puzzle. You must show the council that you understand the balance that must exist between your people and ours. Marcus nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. The trial hadn't been about his survival or his ability to endure, it had been about understanding, about forging a connection that transcended his humanity. He couldn't just be a man from Earth. He had to become a bridge, an understanding force between two worlds that had been separate for so long. Are you ready? Talina asked, her voice almost a whisper now. Are you ready to take that step? The question hung in the air, heavier than any trial or test. This wasn't about proving his strength or courage. It was about proving that he could live in balance, that he could respect both Earth and Tyrex, not as two separate entities but as one unified whole. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the planet beneath his feet once more. Yes, he said, his voice firm. I'm ready. The journey back to the Tyrini encampment was long and quiet, the wilderness no longer unfamiliar but strangely comforting. Marcus felt a deep sense of peace now, as though the land had accepted him, as though it had guided him toward something greater than himself. When they reached the edge of the camp, the firelight of the encampment flickered in the distance, casting a warm glow across the darkening landscape. The women of the tribe were gathered around the fire, their voices rising in song, a low hum that blended with the sounds of the night. Talina stopped before the camp, turning to Marcus. It is time. As they approached, the women fell silent, their eyes turning toward Marcus. There was no judgment, no scrutiny, only the unspoken understanding that the trial had ended and now the council would decide. Lyra stood at the forefront, her gaze steady and knowing. You have completed the trial of the earth, she said, her voice carrying across the clearing. You have proven yourself in ways that few outsiders ever will. But there is more to this than just surviving the land. There is more to this than your bond with Tyrex. She stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Marcus. The question now is whether you can be the bridge we need, whether you can carry the spirit of Tyrex and Earth together. Do you accept that responsibility, Marcus Kane? The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. This was the moment. This was the choice that would shape his future, the future of the Tyrini, and the future of Earth. Marcus took a deep breath, the pulse of Tyrex still resonating within him, its rhythm now a part of his soul. He looked around at the women of the tribe, their faces expectant but full of something else, something hopeful. I accept, he said, his voice unwavering. I accept the responsibility to unite our worlds. Not as an outsider but as someone who understands that we are not separate. We are part of one whole. Lyra nodded slowly and a ripple of approval passed through the tribe. Then it is done, she said. The bond is forged. The future begins now. And with that, Marcus Kane, once a man from Earth, was now a true member of the Tyrini, a bridge between two worlds united not just by law, but by the very pulse of Tyrex itself. The night settled in around the camp, a blanket of quiet broken only by the whispering wind through the trees and the soft crackle of the fire. The Tyrini, the women who had once viewed Marcus with curiosity and skepticism, now looked at him with something deeper, a shared understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement that he had become something more than a visitor. The firelight cast long shadows over the faces of the tribe, and Marcus felt a subtle shift in the air, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The trial of the earth had been only the beginning. What mattered now was what came after, how the bond between Tyrex and Earth would grow and thrive, and whether Marcus could truly serve as the bridge between these two worlds. Lyra, the eldest among them, stepped forward once more. Her silver hair shimmered in the firelight, her eyes sharp but kind. The decision has been made, she said, her voice carrying the authority of a leader who had seen centuries pass and yet remained steadfast. Marcus Kane has passed the trial of the earth, and in doing so, he has shown us that the bond between our people can be more than just a fleeting dream. It can be real. The air hummed with a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. The Tarini were a proud people, bound to their land in ways that were beyond Marcus's understanding before his trial. They had never been willing to trust easily, not even among their own. But here in this moment something had changed. It was as if Tyrex itself had accepted him, not just for his strength or his courage, but for his willingness to listen, to understand, and to adapt. "And what of Earth?" asked Talina, stepping forward as well. She had always been Marcus's closest ally during the trials, and now her role seemed even more significant. She had seen him struggle, seen him grow, and now it was clear that her faith in him had not been misplaced. How will Earth respond? Will they accept what Marcus has done? Lyra's gaze shifted toward the horizon, where the stars were beginning to fade into the light of a new day. We will not wait forever. The planet calls to us and we must answer. The connection between Earth and Tyrex cannot be left to wither in silence. But the question remains, how will the people of Earth respond to what has been built here? Marcus felt the weight of the question fall on his shoulders. He had done his part. He had forged the bond, passed the trial, and become part of Tyrex's heartbeat. But Earth was still far away, a distant planet full of its own struggles, its own prejudices, its own politics. Would humanity be willing to accept the alliance? Would they understand the truth he had come to know on Tyrex? The truth that they were all connected, that their fates were intertwined in ways far deeper than mere survival? "I can't speak for Earth," Marcus said, his voice steady but uncertain. "I don't know what they'll think of this, of what we've created here. But I believe in what I've learned. I believe in the connection between us, between Earth and Tyrex. I felt it. And I'll do whatever it takes to help both worlds see it too." Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then it is not just your bond with Tyrex that we must test, Marcus Kane. It is the willingness of your people to accept what you have come to understand. We will watch. And we will wait. If they do not see what you see, then perhaps we have no future together. But if they do," she let her words hang in the air, leaving them to settle like the dust of an ancient prophecy. Talina stepped closer to Marcus, her presence a quiet reassurance. "Whatever happens, Marcus, know that you have done what few before you could ever accomplish. You've earned the respect of our people. And you've proven that it is not just Earth or Tyrex that will shape the future. It is all of us, together." Marcus felt the enormity of her words. They were not just a comfort, they were a challenge. They had faith in him now, but the true test was yet to come. He had bridged the gap between his people and the Tarini, but that bridge needed to stretch across the stars. Earth had to see what he saw, feel what he felt, and understand what was at stake. The night deepened and the fires of the camp flickered low. The Tarini women began to gather around him, their faces lit by the soft glow, their eyes reflecting the bond they had witnessed. They were no longer the distant, unapproachable figures he had first encountered. They were his tribe now, just as he was a part of theirs. They had welcomed him and he had welcomed them. It was a rare and precious thing, this unity. Lyra's voice cut through the quiet. "Tomorrow we begin the journey. We will return to the heart of Tyrex, to the council. There, we will tell them of what you have accomplished and we will see what they decide. The future of our people and the future of Earth will depend on it." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Tomorrow the real challenge would begin. Tyrex had accepted him, and the Tarini had put their faith in him. But now he had to bring that faith to Earth. He had to find a way to bridge the distance, to make his people see the truth he had come to understand, that the survival of one world depended on the survival of the other. That without balance neither would endure. As the firelight dimmed and the stars took their rightful place in the sky, Marcus stood, feeling the pull of both worlds. Tyrex had awakened something within him, something he had never known existed. And now he would awaken it in others. He would carry the message of Tyrex back to Earth, and he would fight for the future of both worlds, no matter the cost. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.